You are on the verge of losing something real, not because it is weak, but because it is too powerful for you to understand. This person truly loves you, not in the way you expected, not in the way that feels easy, but in a way that is transforming you. And that is exactly why you feel like running. Love is often misunderstood as something that should feel immediately safe, soothing, and stable. But in reality, it frequently announces itself through inner disturbance. When someone truly matters to you, your psychological equilibrium is disrupted because something deeper than surface-level attraction is activated. This disturbance is not a flaw in the connection. It is evidence of its depth. The mind begins to question, analyze, and even resist, not because the feeling is false, but because it is significant enough to challenge your existing patterns. At a deeper level, genuine affection interacts with parts of you that are not fully conscious. It stirs unresolved emotions, past experiences, and hidden fears that have been quietly shaping your behavior. When another person gets close enough to touch those layers, the reaction is rarely calm. Instead, it feels like tension, confusion, or even anxiety. You may interpret this as a warning sign, assuming something is wrong, when in fact, it is your inner world trying to process something meaningful. This is why real love can feel unsettling. It forces you to confront contradictions within yourself, such as the desire to be close while also wanting to protect your independence. The disturbance arises because love is not just about connection with another person. It is also about confrontation with yourself. It exposes the gap between your emotional needs and your defenses. Many people misread this internal reaction and withdraw, believing they are protecting themselves from a mistake. In truth, they may be stepping away from a rare opportunity to grow. The disturbance is not there to harm you, but to signal that something within you is being awakened, something that cannot remain unchanged once it has been touched. Genuine affection does not remain confined to conscious awareness. It penetrates deeper layers of the psyche where unresolved fears and unacknowledged desires reside. When someone truly loves you, their presence begins to activate these hidden dimensions, often without either of you realizing it. What feels like a simple emotional bond on the surface is, beneath it, a complex psychological interaction that stirs what has been dormant within you. This is why strong affection can feel overwhelming or even contradictory. You may experience a powerful longing for closeness alongside an equally strong urge to retreat. These opposing impulses are not signs of confusion about the other person. They are reflections of internal material being brought into awareness. Love, in its genuine form, acts as a catalyst. It does not create fears or desires out of nothing, but it reveals what was already there, waiting beneath the surface. Unconscious fears often relate to vulnerability, rejection, or loss of control. When someone's affection becomes real and consistent, these fears are triggered because the stakes feel higher. At the same time, unconscious desires, such as the need to be fully seen, accepted, or emotionally secure, begin to rise. This creates an internal tension, as one part of you moves toward connection, while another tries to maintain safety by pulling away. What makes this process significant is that it is not random. The person who evokes these reactions is often aligned with aspects of yourself that you have not fully integrated. Their presence becomes a mirror, reflecting both your unmet needs and your defensive patterns. This is why the experience can feel intense and difficult to manage. Instead of viewing these reactions as a sign that something is wrong, it is more accurate to see them as evidence that something meaningful is unfolding within your inner world. Emotional intensity is often mistaken for instability or incompatibility, but in many cases, it is a marker of psychological importance. When a connection triggers unusually strong feelings, whether excitement, anxiety, longing, or even fear, it is rarely superficial. The psyche does not mobilize that level of energy without reason. Intensity signals that something within you recognizes the interaction as meaningful, even if your conscious mind struggles to interpret it clearly. At a deeper level, this intensity arises because the experience is engaging multiple layers of your inner world at once. It is not just about the present interaction with another person. It is also linked to past emotional imprints, unmet needs, and internal narratives that have been quietly shaping your expectations of connection. When all of these layers are activated simultaneously, the result is a heightened emotional state that can feel difficult to regulate. This is why such experiences often feel consuming. Your attention keeps returning to the person, not out of simple attraction, but because your mind is attempting to process the significance of what is being activated. The intensity pulls your focus inward as much as it pulls you toward them. It creates a sense of urgency, as if something important is unfolding that cannot be ignored or postponed. However, intensity does not automatically mean harmony or long-term compatibility. It indicates significance, not necessarily stability. The key distinction is that intensity reveals the presence of psychological material that demands attention. It highlights areas where you are emotionally invested, vulnerable, or unresolved. Many people attempt to suppress or escape this intensity because it feels overwhelming, but doing so often prevents them from understanding what the experience is trying to reveal. The emotional charge itself is information, pointing towards something within you that is active, alive, and seeking recognition. True love does not simply affirm who you already are. It exerts pressure on the structure of your identity. It brings you into contact with the limits of your self-concept and exposes where that concept has been constructed for safety rather than authenticity. When another person genuinely connects with you, they do not only respond to the version of yourself you consciously present, they respond to deeper aspects of your personality, some of which you may not fully accept or even recognize. This is why real love can feel destabilizing. It challenges the narratives you rely on to maintain a sense of control. You may see yourself as independent, guarded, or self-sufficient, but a meaningful connection can reveal underlying needs for closeness, validation, or emotional exposure. These contradictions create tension because they force you to reconsider who you believe you are. The challenge is not directed at your worth, but at your rigidity. Identity often becomes fixed over time, shaped by past experiences, defenses, and adaptations. Love introduces a dynamic element that disrupts this rigidity. It asks you to expand, to integrate qualities you may have suppressed, and to acknowledge parts of yourself that do not fit neatly into your established image. This process can feel threatening because identity provides a sense of stability. When it is questioned, even in a constructive way, the immediate reaction is often resistance. You may interpret the discomfort as a sign that something is wrong with the relationship, when in reality it is the result of your internal structure being challenged to evolve. The person who truly loves you becomes a catalyst for this transformation. Their presence invites you to move beyond familiar patterns and into a more complete version of yourself, one that includes both strength and vulnerability, certainty and openness, control and surrender. The fear of loss often does not reflect the actual presence or absence of a connection, but rather the emotional significance that connection has acquired within the psyche. When someone becomes deeply meaningful to you, the mind begins to anticipate their absence even while they are still present. This anticipation creates anxiety that can distort perception, making you believe that the bond is unstable or slipping away when, in reality, it is your internal attachment system becoming more activated. This reaction is rooted in the way the mind protects itself from emotional vulnerability. Once a person is perceived as important, They are unconsciously registered as something whose potential loss would create emotional impact. The psyche then begins to simulate scenarios of separation, distance, or rejection as a form of preparation. This is not an accurate reflection of reality, but a defensive mechanism designed to reduce shock if loss were to occur. However, this protective process often creates confusion. The emotional signals generated by fear can feel indistinguishable from actual evidence of disconnection. Small changes in tone, timing, or attention may be interpreted as signs that something is going wrong. In this state, perception becomes filtered through anxiety rather than clarity, and the relationship begins to feel uncertain even if it remains intact. What makes this even more complex is that the fear of loss intensifies emotional attachment. The more significant someone becomes internally, the more the mind attempts to safeguard against their absence. This creates a loop where attachment and fear reinforce each other, increasing emotional sensitivity and reactivity. At its core, this experience reveals how deeply the psyche invests in meaningful connections. The fear itself is not proof of instability in the relationship, but evidence of emotional value. It shows that the bond has reached a level where it is no longer neutral to the mind, but integrated into its sense of emotional security and internal balance. Projection plays a central role in romantic attachment because the mind rarely encounters another person as they truly are at the beginning of a relationship. Instead, it fills in the gaps of what is unknown with internal material, memories, desires, unmet needs, and unresolved emotional experiences. This process is unconscious, meaning the individual is often unaware that they are seeing not only the other person, but also aspects of themselves reflected onto them. When someone evokes strong attraction, it is not only their actual qualities that create the bond, but also what they come to represent internally. They may symbolize safety, validation, emotional rescue, or even an opportunity for transformation. These symbolic meanings are not consciously assigned. They emerge from deeper layers of the psyche that are seeking expression or resolution. Because of this, the intensity of early attachment can sometimes exceed what is justified by reality alone. The emotional charge is amplified by internal projections that give the relationship a heightened sense of significance. The other person becomes a kind of emotional screen onto which inner experiences are projected, making them appear larger, more idealized, or more threatening than they objectively are. As the relationship develops and reality becomes more visible, tension often arises. The projected image begins to collide with the actual personality of the other person. This can lead to disappointment, confusion, or even emotional withdrawal, not necessarily because the person has changed, but because the projection can no longer be maintained in its original form. However, projection is not inherently negative. It serves as a bridge between unconscious material and conscious awareness. When recognized, it becomes a tool for understanding oneself more deeply. The emotional reactions directed toward the other person often reveal more about inner psychological needs than about the external situation itself. Love often acts as a mirror that reflects parts of the psyche that have not yet been fully acknowledged or integrated. When a meaningful connection forms, it does not only engage the conscious personality, but also draws attention to emotional material that has been suppressed, ignored, or never fully processed. This is why relationships can feel so psychologically revealing. They bring hidden aspects of the self into contact with awareness through interaction with another person. Unresolved inner conflicts typically arise from contradictions within the psyche that have not been reconciled over time. For example, a person may simultaneously crave emotional closeness while also fearing dependency, or desire authenticity while maintaining protective emotional distance. These opposing forces often coexist beneath conscious awareness, but they become more visible when intimacy increases. A relationship intensifies these tensions because it creates situations where both desires and fears are activated at the same time. When someone truly connects with you, their presence can trigger these unresolved dynamics because they become emotionally significant enough to matter deeply to your internal system. As a result, your reactions toward them are not purely based on who they are, but also on what they awaken within you. Emotional responses such as anxiety, idealization, irritation, or withdrawal may not be direct reactions to the person, but expressions of internal conflict being stimulated. This process can feel destabilizing because it removes the illusion of internal consistency. What once felt manageable within the self begins to surface in real time through relational experience. Instead of remaining abstract psychological tension, it becomes lived emotional reality. However, this exposure is not accidental. It creates an opportunity for awareness. By revealing these conflicts, relationships force the individual to confront parts of themselves that were previously unconscious. The emotional intensity surrounding love is often the signal that these deeper layers are becoming active and cannot remain hidden in the same way anymore. Avoidance is rarely a simple act of disinterest. It is more often a psychological defense against emotional exposure. When a connection begins to feel significant, it naturally creates a state of vulnerability. The more emotionally invested a person becomes, the more they risk being affected by rejection, disappointment, or loss. To manage this risk, the mind develops strategies that create distance, and avoidance is one of the most common of these strategies. This distancing does not always appear obvious. It can manifest as reduced communication, emotional withdrawal, over-analysis of the relationship, or a sudden focus on perceived flaws in the other person. These behaviors are not necessarily evidence that the connection is weak, but rather that the emotional stakes have become too high for the internal system to handle comfortably. Avoidance functions as a way to reduce intensity when feelings begin to exceed what feels safe. At a deeper level, avoidance is connected to fear of vulnerability. Emotional closeness requires a willingness to be seen without control over how one is perceived or treated. For individuals who have experienced emotional instability, rejection, or inconsistency in the past, this openness can feel threatening. The psyche remembers emotional pain and attempts to prevent its repetition by creating distance before it becomes too risky. However, avoidance often creates a paradox. While it temporarily reduces discomfort, it also interrupts the very connection that is generating meaning and emotional depth. The person may feel relief from stepping back, but also a sense of confusion or emptiness because something significant is being held at a distance. In many cases, avoidance is not a rejection of the other person, but a struggle with the intensity of one's own emotional response. It reflects an internal conflict between the desire for closeness and the need for safety, where safety temporarily takes priority even when the connection itself holds genuine importance and psychological weight. Emotional resistance often appears when a connection begins to carry more meaning than the psyche feels prepared to process. On the surface, it may look like doubt, hesitation, or even rejection of the other person, but underneath it is usually a protective response to emotional depth. When feelings intensify, the mind does not always move smoothly toward acceptance. Instead, it may generate friction as a way of maintaining internal balance. This resistance emerges because genuine emotional involvement reduces psychological distance. When someone matters deeply, they are no longer just an external presence. They begin to occupy internal space, influencing thoughts, moods, and expectations. This shift can feel destabilizing, especially if the individual is not accustomed to sustained emotional openness. The resistance is then activated as an attempt to regain a sense of control over what feels overwhelming. At a deeper level, this process is closely linked to emotional conditioning from past experiences. If closeness has previously led to disappointment, inconsistency, or emotional pain, the mind learns to associate attachment with risk. Even when the current situation is different, the emotional memory remains active. As a result, resistance arises not necessarily because of the present connection, but because of what that connection unconsciously resembles. This is why resistance can feel contradictory. A person may feel drawn to someone while simultaneously finding reasons to pull away. These opposing impulses are not signs of confusion about the other person's value, but signs of an internal system attempting to regulate emotional exposure. The psyche is trying to manage how much closeness it can tolerate without feeling threatened. What makes emotional resistance particularly significant is that it often increases in proportion to attachment. The more meaningful the connection becomes, the stronger the internal pushback may be. This does not always indicate incompatibility. It often indicates that something within the individual is being activated that requires awareness and integration rather than immediate rejection or escape. Growth in relationships is not a comfortable process. It is a confrontation with what has been avoided, delayed, or kept unconscious within the self. Real development does not occur in emotional safety alone, but in moments where comfort is disrupted and deeper awareness becomes unavoidable. When a meaningful connection enters your life, it often acts as a catalyst that exposes patterns you may not have previously questioned. Confronting discomfort means allowing yourself to stay present with emotions that would normally trigger withdrawal. These may include insecurity, jealousy, fear of abandonment, or the anxiety of being truly seen. Instead of immediately reacting to these feelings by escaping or rationalizing them away, growth requires observing them as signals rather than threats. This shift in perspective is subtle but transformative because it changes emotional experience from something that controls you into something you can understand. Discomfort in relationships is often misinterpreted as a sign that something is wrong with the connection itself. However, much of this discomfort originates internally. It arises when new emotional experiences challenge old psychological structures. These structures were created for protection, but they can become limiting when they prevent deeper intimacy or self-understanding. Growth requires recognizing when these internal systems are no longer serving development. This process is not linear. It involves cycles of expansion and resistance, where moments of insight are followed by emotional tension. Each time discomfort is faced rather than avoided, the capacity for emotional depth increases. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes more integrated and less threatening. Ultimately, growth in relationships depends on willingness to remain engaged during moments of inner conflict. It requires moving beyond the instinct to escape discomfort and instead using it as information about unresolved parts of the self. In doing so, the relationship becomes not just an external bond, but a space where internal transformation gradually unfolds through lived emotional experience. The psyche does not develop in isolation. It moves toward wholeness through relationship, because another person provides a living context in which inner fragments can be activated and recognized. When a meaningful connection forms, it often brings into contact aspects of the self that have remained split off from conscious identity. These may include disowned emotions, hidden desires, or undeveloped capacities that have not yet been integrated into a coherent sense of self. The idea of wholeness in this context does not mean perfection or completion in a fixed sense, but rather the gradual integration of different psychological parts that were previously disconnected. Human beings naturally develop certain dominant traits while suppressing others, often as a response to early life experiences and social conditioning. Over time, this creates an internal imbalance where some aspects of the personality are well expressed, while others remain latent or underdeveloped. Connection with another person becomes a mirror through which these missing or underrepresented aspects are revealed. For example, qualities that are admired or strongly reacted to in another individual often reflect something that exists in potential within oneself. The emotional intensity of these reactions is not random. It points toward areas of psychological significance where integration is possible. This process can feel destabilizing because it challenges the fixed self-image that provides a sense of continuity and control. As new emotional experiences arise, the boundaries of identity begin to shift. What once felt like a stable definition of self becomes more fluid, requiring adjustment and reinterpretation. The drive toward wholeness is not a conscious strategy, but a deep psychological tendency. It expresses itself through attraction, conflict, projection, and emotional intensity within relationships. Each interaction that evokes strong feeling becomes an opportunity for previously unconscious material to surface. In this way, connection with others is not only about companionship or attachment, but also about internal development. Through emotional engagement, the psyche gradually moves toward a more integrated state, where previously divided aspects of experience begin to coexist within a broader and more flexible sense of self, without needing to conclude the process prematurely. Letting go prematurely often happens when emotional intensity is mistaken for instability, or when discomfort is interpreted as incompatibility. In reality, early withdrawal from a meaningful connection can interrupt a deeper psychological process that is still unfolding. When two people form a strong emotional link, the mind does not immediately understand its full significance. It gradually processes it through experience, reflection, and emotional adaptation. Ending that process too early can prevent insights from fully forming. At the beginning of a significant connection, emotional reactions tend to be amplified. Uncertainty, vulnerability, and internal resistance can create confusion about what the relationship actually represents. These reactions are not always reliable indicators of the connection's value. They are often reflections of internal adjustment. The psyche is trying to integrate new emotional input, and during this phase, clarity is not immediate. When someone withdraws too quickly, they may be responding more to temporary internal discomfort than to the actual reality of the bond. This can result in the loss of experiences that would have clarified misunderstandings or allowed emotional patterns to evolve naturally. Psychological integration requires time because it involves aligning new emotional experiences with existing inner structures. Premature letting go can also reinforce avoidance patterns. Each time discomfort leads to immediate separation, the mind learns to prioritize escape over understanding. This limits emotional growth and reduces the capacity to tolerate complexity in future relationships. Over time, this can create a cycle where meaningful connections are repeatedly abandoned before they reach their developmental potential. However, staying does not mean forcing or ignoring genuine incompatibility. It refers to allowing sufficient time for emotional signals to be understood beyond initial reactions. The key distinction lies in whether the response is driven by reflective awareness or by immediate emotional turbulence. When emotional processes are allowed to unfold rather than being interrupted, they often reveal deeper clarity. What initially feels confusing or overwhelming can gradually transform into understanding, provided the experience is not cut short before its meaning has fully emerged within the internal psychological landscape.